Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Confluential Live. Happy Friday. I am Kyler Cheatham, joined by Adam Cheatham as always, and we're super happy to be here with you on this Friday morning. Today, we're kind of going into more of a broad strategy, but it's actually pretty nuanced to each organization. And it's how do we turn executive technical strategy into like an operational reality, right? How do we make sure that people looking at this in PowerPoints, approving budgets, are actually being able to execute it successfully on the shop floor? As we always say, the shop floor doesn't speak PowerPoint. And so we need to be able to decide how that really works within our organization. So we're going to, take you through some examples today and kind of have that conversation. But before we do, just a few logistics. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn today. So if you're joining us from our TikTok stream, welcome. We're excited to have you here, but feel free to drop your thoughts on the conversation. That's a big piece of this live, is being able to share all of these different ideas, different approaches, because no two businesses are the same, right? Every business is going to have a different way of doing this, and being able to provide those examples, ask those questions is really, really helpful to helping us spread the message of being able to own your technology strategies, making it successful for your business, not somebody else's, right? So with that, Adam, I'd love for you to do just a quick intro on, what you're feeling like today on this Friday morning, and we'll get into it.
Well, those are two different topics, aren't they? My name is Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confluential. What I'm feeling like on this Friday morning is that I'm ready for the weekend. It's been a busy week, but we've also had a great week of topics like turning executive strategies
Exactly.
into operational realities, right? So when we think about technology, everybody wants technology to be the backbone of their business. They want AI to be the accelerator of all of their things, and there's all these conversations that sound great. This is what we're doing. AI is accelerating our business. Okay, how? And that's that singular question, how, followed just as much by why,
Mm-hmm.
are two of the most important pieces of how you turn executive strategy into an operational reality. It's not enough to just say go do this. There are ways of knowing things like what does success look like. Those types of putting your business pants on and walking into an office that operates on KPIs, OKRs, stuff like that. Those are great ways of turning executive strategy into operational reality. So I'm pretty stoked to talk about this today. I think that one of the things that we do as a company quite well is work in the turn strategy into a reality, and
Mm-hmm.
it's always funny to me when we're running through things like this, and we're just here doing our job, right? We focus on doing the right things, and we focus
Mm-hmm.
on the results and the execution. And it's always surprising to me how astounded people are at how well it works.
Mm-hmm.
We can there are two answers that I get so regularly. We couldn't have done this by ourselves in a year, what you did in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great news. That's the point. That's where we
Right.
say we've added value, right? Um, my actual favorite is when you have comments that are on the lines of, "We've been trying to hire somebody to do this for ages, and we hired somebody else to do this piece, somebody else to do that piece, and somebody else to do this piece, and you're doing all of those better than all three of them combined."
Mm-hmm.
We hear regularly. I'm so glad at least somebody's adding value here, because we hire all these consultants, and you
Mm-hmm.
guys are the ones that are doing all of the work. And that's a great position to be in, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, that means that what we do is connecting. That means that our when we say we're going to take this executive strategy and we're going to turn it into an operational reality, it's not bullshit,
Yeah.
right? That's the thing, and that's I think what differentiates us so much as an organization is a lot of companies out there that just talk about it like if you say it enough times, it will happen. Like you can wish it or will it into
Mm-hmm.
reality, and that's just not the way that it goes. It's about sitting down and doing the work and um, That's the hardest part. That's
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, when we go into these organizations, it's not because they're not able to, just like any problem, right? Like if you're too close to it, it can be a challenge to understand. A lot of these are translation problems. So, like
yeah.
for example, when an executive says we needs to be more data driven, 9 times out of 10, they don't really know what that means. Operation is like, okay, well, here comes another trash board. IT is like, we need to buy a platform. And then, 6 months later, everyone is wondering why nothing has changed. And a lot of times that's because we're not speaking the same language or understanding what that means as far as operational capacity or operational execution on these types of things. So, in that, like, where are you seeing the sticking point a lot of times in these organizations? A lot of times, it's going to be different, but is there a main point or area that you see become a challenge?
I think it's that people get wrapped up in the sentiment and they forget about the work.
Hmm.
And if you take that, and the other part of it is that when your team is designed to do what it's always done. That's how you've hired. That you've hired for a role that you can build and continue on because you've done that before. That's how, especially with large organizations, how
Yeah.
hiring practices go. They literally say, "Do we have a job rec that exists for this?"
Hmm.
And somebody says, "Well, no, this is a very particular job." And somebody goes, "Right, but this one's pretty close, right? Can we use that?" And all of a sudden, what you've done now is you've made them the same, and that's fine because your business is working. There's a reason companies get to 100 million, 200 million, $1 billion in size because what they do works, right? The execution
Hmm.
is happening. That's a different muscle than change. And
Hmm.
I've had many conversations with clients where they say things like, we hired this person to do this transformational thing. They got 20 years of experience in it. They can't figure out how to transform it. It's like, right, because they've been doing it for 20 years one way.
Hmm.
They haven't been doing 20 years of change.
Yeah.
They've been doing 20 years of X, operations, sales, finance, whatever. And so that thought process of what is change is a key part that gets missed. And this is where um, the thought process of change intelligence takes
Yeah.
over, in my opinion. And for those of you who have followed us long enough, you maybe know what we mean by that. But to catch everyone else up, change intelligence is about creating a muscle memory for being able to adapt, right?
Hmm.
So, what are we doing as it pertains to not just this one change, but all of the changes that come because that one thing changed?
Hmm.
That's transformation, right? Transformation is not one change, it's all of the changes that happen after the first. And then they begin to snowball, they begin to compound, whatever you want to call it. And that I think that mentality is what's missing quite a lot from when we have a
Yeah.
strategy that is intended to turn into some type of an operational change.
Absolutely. And I think the level at which a lot of times those things get really messy is like the ownership, right? Like it's very difficult to know. Like we, often kind of go against the grain when it comes to change management because that's, a softer skill, not that it's a bad skill, right? But it is something that a lot of times that's going to be owned by like HR or a change management team in general, and we're less focused on the overall understanding of that, but more of how are we going to execute it in operations? That's going to be the change. How are we going to make this frontline worker completely change their job? That now they're, from driving a forklift to behind a computer screen driving the forklift with,
Yeah.
those types of different pieces. That's the change piece. But I think a lot of times where that gets lost is the ownership. Like, would
Hmm.
you agree?
I'd say so, yeah, because it takes multiple levels of an organization to change. especially if it's an executive strategy that needs to go all the way down to the shop floor, the warehouse floor, wherever it is. It's the people that do the job every day. And there are often multiple levels of management where that message gets softened again and again and again and again. And one of the things that I've seen that's really useful, one of our clients does this on the regular. They set objectives every year. The CEO says these are our company
Mhm.
objectives every year. And then what they do is they tie everything they do to them. Not not it's not a he sets it and then expects everybody else to facilitate it. He sets it and then his executives carry that his the,
Mhm.
below him carry those messages and say this is what we're rallying behind. But there's a communication in that where this president of this company owns that relationship not just with his executives but
Yes.
several levels down
Yeah.
where they know what he wants and they know what he means. He communicates that well. So when he says, when we're talking about what operational excellence is, he knows what that means for each department. So he expects the people that work in those departments to know what that means for them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then he sets the stage for saying, and I expect you to live that. And it
Mhm.
becomes livable because he engages with it. And then he helps his executives do that and he connects at multiple levels. And then initiatives come to the table. There are, I want to do this. And the answer, the question about why is well, because it aligns with this and this and this. And then the
Yeah.
next question is how? How does it align with those things? And how are you going to execute it in a way that aligns with those things? And all of their projects come in a way that are designed in that space. And not everybody's as good at it as others, but they also have mechanisms for um, how do we connect this good idea more directly to those things so that the way that we execute it is within that executive strategy because you could take the same project and you can execute it one way that is not this misaligned and heads off in the wrong direction, or you can
Mhm.
execute it in another way where it's nice and tightly synced, and then all of a sudden all the other things that are nice and tightly synced with that fit together as opposed to are all over the place.
So, executive strategy, I want to build a house.
Mhm.
Then layering down, how do we pull out each of those kind of strategic objectives like from that, right? I want to build a house. Well, how many bedrooms does it have? How many bathrooms does it have? Right? How do we kind of go into making sure that we're building a house, right? But are we building, a house that is 20,000 square feet versus the 12, right? Do you see what I mean?
I get what you're saying. I think that the question becomes what is the executive looking for in this and how do we align behind it, right? Some of this is about a company culture,
Yeah.
right? There's not any real way around that. If the executive says this and the rest of the company culture isn't aligned towards that, they're stuck in a look. We're just here to do a job. Like supposedly Anthropic's CEO is now worried about this that his company's just there to get paid as opposed to align with the mission.
Fine
That's
by me.
that sounds simple and that sounds poor Anthropic CEO, but that's such a disaster thing to
Mhm.
say out loud. Our company's here just to collect a paycheck,
Mhm.
right? If you don't like, I get it. If you're not going to get paid by that company, you're not going to work for that company. There is an expectation in that exchange, but at the same time, if you separate the money from the conversation once that's taken
Mhm.
care of, what are you contributing? And turning executive strategy into operational reality turns that question over and says, I'm contributing this way because I believe in it. And that's something that only company culture can really do well. That being said, that doesn't mean that not that you can't do it against the grain, and not in company cultures that are a bit more oriented towards the I just here to collect the paycheck. That it can happen there too. It's just harder to do.
Yeah.
We do have a question here. When leaders are trying to align good ideas with the executive strategies, do you find that there's vague correlations just to check a box while the idea existed in parallel to the strategy? There's probably a bit of that a lot of times. That's a good question, right? Like I've had this pet project that I've been trying to chase for quite some time. And now that I have a strategy to tie it to, I'm going to try to fabricate something that connects the dots. Um, in that space, you kind of have to have a dose of reality in it,
Yeah.
right? Is this a stretch or is it actually work, right? And then, because if it's a stretch, everybody that you're going to ask for help with on that is going to know it's a stretch,
Hmm.
and everybody that knows that the dots connect and that we're aligned. If you're able to do that, then and align them effectively, people will buy into it too because you just got a piece of the president's
Yeah.
uh, goodwill in their mind because you're bought into the same larger vision as opposed to individual mini missions. I think that's a good question on this. Just to say, am I trying to get my own agenda across, or do I fit within the what it is we're looking for? Because that's something that you can build governance mechanisms around to make
Hmm.
sure that things are reinforced within alignment of the executive strategy. And that's another good way of making sure that there are levels that come down and that reaches the shop floor. So,
I think so too. I think that that piece of vague correlations, right, is going to be people are going to be able to see through that, especially in the operation side,
yeah.
because they don't have time for vague correlation, right? They have to make
Yeah.
sure that product is shipped out the door on
Mhm.
time, and that's their job. So I think in operations, the nice part about that is a lot of those things are going to get kind of blown through if they're super fluffy in
Yeah.
those types of pieces. It has to where I was going, with this strategic initiative thing, if we're going to create operational excellence, then maybe to us that means we're going to decrease downtime by
Mhm.
5-10%, right? And so how are we going to do that? That starts with the strategy, the business outcome, right? The decisions, the process, the people, the data, and then the technology, right? And then
Yeah.
all of that is kind of rolled into one on those types of pieces, but it has to go through each one of those levels
Mhm.
to understand that.
Well, I think that's a great point, especially as you start thinking about tying it to something that exists, right? Vague correlations and all of this, like this is another reason that I love when people connect to our mission, right, and how we work,
Mhm.
because there's no fluff involved in it.
Yeah.
It's very direct and it's very oriented towards execution and results, right? And when you start thinking about the folks that are used to it being fluffy and this and the other, and they see what reality can actually
Mhm.
be, there's such a great wake up call on the now we're in business. Now we're doing it, right? Now we believe it, we've seen it, and we're rolling on it because um, I'm losing my train of thought because I'm excited. We're
You're
excited about.
so pumped?
Well, I think at the end of the day, um, if you tie it to something that you expect to actually happen, then it becomes reality, right? You can say things like, "I'm going to get my financial house in order,"
Mhm.
and then and if you stop there, you say nothing about what that means. Are
Mhm.
we even talking about making sure, for example, that our cash flow in is greater than cash flow out? Well,
Right.
never thought of that. Okay, well, what we just did is we established two metrics and saying, I want to measure this one and I want to measure that one. Actually, we established three because we
Mhm.
are looking at the net between the two. And now we're measuring, and now we're looking at real things. They're
Mhm.
not this conceptual thing that's difficult to grasp and that other folks can have different definitions of. And I think that at the large company level, it's so easy to get to the point
Yeah.
where your executives aren't working as a group. They're expected to work individually,
Mhm.
and that vision gets it strays from one, and everybody's interpretation becomes different. And then they execute in different directions, and now we're all over the place with our vague correlations and these little mini missions that don't fit the overall conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that that speaks to the company culture. Like, can that trickle down and it not be a selfish agenda, right? But be for the greater good. And I think that's where a
Yeah.
lot of times when we go in and things are like super messy, or, IT and accounting are fighting or whatever, right? Type of thing. A lot of times it's because our mindset is they're against me, right? They want to do something, and that's how that kind of toxic culture or that toxic idea
Hmm.
gets in there, because they've been burned before, right? They didn't,
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, they didn't just make that up in their brain, right? They
Yeah.
saw it happen before. And that can be a huge detriment to facilitating, executing, and implementation, is having people that won't come to the table, right?
Yeah.
And as Adam always says, that's a data point in itself.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why that happens, and that's going to be an obstacle, an operational obstacle, whether you want to call it change management or trust fall, kumbaya, whatever, right? It certainly is going to be a situation in which we're going to have to address.
Well, I think that you just kind of triggered something in my brain that's like tweaking sideways, the trust fall stuff. Um, what I love about the folks that we work with, so we work with a lot of heavy industry folks, metals manufacturing and the like. And the lessons that we learn from them apply to all industries, but more effectively to others, because when you talk to somebody that's been working in metal for decades, they really don't care what it looks like. They
Hmm.
don't care as long as the product gets out the door and it's high quality, and that we are meeting our customers' demands on time delivery, and high quality. This is what matters. Is we're down to the basics, right? And so you talk to somebody about these trust falls and stuff like that. Somebody that actually works with machinery on a
Hmm.
shop floor, and they're like, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my
Hmm.
life."
Hmm.
And they're very direct and
Yeah.
basic in their connection with reality. The more you get separated from the reality of the shop floor, the more you start talking about these conversations like, well, we need to have this change management where everybody's opinion is considered. And let me tell you something, there are sometimes bad ideas.
Oh, for sure.
There are sometimes bad ideas that should be rooted out. And
Yeah.
it's like business is not a scenario where everybody's ideas should hold equal weight. Everybody's ideas should be correlated to dollars,
Hmm.
and the dollars should hold equal weight. Your dollar and my dollar are the same. I come with more dollars of value and I get more out of it.
Hmm.
Those are the things that we should be doing.
Hmm.
And that it should always be tied to that. And there are things that are initiatives that are a little bit softer and strategic in nature. And this is where the executive strategy comes in. They say, we're going to decide to um, take a softer approach to the community, and we are going to brand ourselves in a way as a community investor. I'll take for example the mining client that we've worked with. They invest heavily in the local community,
Hmm.
heavily. You want to know why? Because if the local community is really upset about the fact that they're digging holes in their backyard and ripping all of the ore from the earth, we start to have problems. Those
Hmm.
problems come into the lives of the people that work there, and those people who work there become influenced by these problems on the whole. And all of a sudden, we have an impact to the people that work at our organization because we draw our people from the local community, right? And so we want that local community to be happy. Another great example of a client I worked with in the past, when they do company wide engagement surveys to track, make sure that their employees are happy. Happy employees are more productive. This is proven, and
Hmm.
not because we want them to simply be happy. It's because we want them to stick around. We want their productivity to be high, and that's good for both of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your productivity is high, that works for me. You're a happy employee because I do good things for you, that works for you. We're in an awesome spot together. Yes, this is a relationship. And so we're focused on it that way. But they take it one step further in making sure that they get not just the employee, they survey the employee's family. Why? Because their culture is driven around, if my person needs to go home to their family. And I mean, how many people have seen it out there where uh, mom or dad comes home from work and they're just driven down to the bone. They're upset. They're angry. They bring all their stress home. And what does their spouse or partner say? You should quit that job. It's not worth it. It's driving you crazy. It's ruining your happiness. And that's in turn ruining mine. And so they're surveying the family
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that, are there people going home happy? And that in turn, what that does is it creates a community within this business that allows them to have employees that trust the executive vision and get aligned behind it. And now turning executive strategy into operational reality becomes executable through that culture. There's a, and so that conversation comes down faster, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important. Um, Another great question from Ryan here: is there a chance that the inexperience in change or adaptability that Adam mentioned can be seen or potentially misidentified as a toxic culture? That absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It usually is, I would add. Yeah, it usually is.
It may not be immediately matter in addressing the symptom, but does that differentiate matter in really resolving the root cause? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
A company, like most of the time, a toxic company culture um, is more of a symptom by itself, right? Learning and being knowledgeable and being able to adapt effectively is something that is learned on its own. Learning is learned. I'm a little bit word salad on that, but but it's an adaptability that becomes a muscle mechanism, right? I'll use a personal example on this. That when we founded the Confidential, one of my goals was to pay more attention to the health of my body because I had let that go and deteriorate. I wasn't paying attention to how those things worked. And I started thinking about it more as a whole system. And I started trying to train it differently. One of the things that it took me a long time, I was certainly one of those that, back in the day when I was in college, when I was weightlifting and stuff like that, I didn't. Who skips leg day? I did. Uh, but what that caused me to do is that I had to learn and teach myself how to do squats and how to do deadlifts safely, right? You don't just jump in and do it. You also need the right safety equipment, a good weight belt, and this, that, and the other. And then you start with lower weights. And you start to focus on form so that you build muscles that know what they're doing, right? I mean, it takes a long time to develop that to carry weight.
Mm-hmm.
This type of an organizational skill set and change intelligence and adaptability is really difficult to learn because it's not just one person that you have to impact, it's a whole organization. And they all need to figure out how to learn more quickly, be more adaptable, have that agility become something that's more ingrained. And it takes a minute, right? We start, and at the same time, though, it's a reminder that needs to start settling in, and this
Mm-hmm.
is where that intelligence side of it comes in. We're not changing it once, we're changing it for all of the changes that
Mm-hmm.
happen after that. And the concept that we like is being able to say, now that we've done it one time, let's reinforce that and continue changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's not change once and stay there. We're creating an adaptability that continues. So you take bites. It doesn't happen overnight, and it continues. One of the examples is a lot of times executive strategy can involve turning an IT organization from a waterfall organization to an agile organization. And some folks think this is just a change
Yeah.
in discussion, right? It's not. It's not just a change in words. It's a cultural change in adaptability. And what
Hmm.
do? You start by finding out how to move the first piece,
Right.
then you move the other pieces in behind it, and you move the whole thing or forward. You take a couple of pieces and you move them, and then you bring a couple behind it and you start moving those. Then you bring more behind that, and then that conversation becomes, we're changing continuously, and that becomes a more effective strategy and execution to be able to bring the company along. And it's difficult to really put those into defined steps when it's got to be
Hmm.
company by company, right? Every company is going to change differently. Their pace will be different. And sometimes you'll have paces that are quick and then they'll slow down because we hit a wall, and you got to know where, when you're drilling through something that's a little bit more dense. Other
Hmm.
ones that are they're just going to be slow. I've got one client where we had to set goals that we know we're not going to make, because if we don't shoot for those, we'll miss the actual goal. And so
Really?
we said, we're going to do this in this is going to be done in 3 months, knowing that it's going to take us six. But if we say it's going to take 6 months, um, they won't know how to pace themselves. It's and that is just an adjustment that we've made, and everybody is kind of knows this too about their culture, so they set up and they charge towards it, and they're all right with not making it because they know that they're going to be able to get there when they ought to, instead of when they said they were going to.
That's so interesting. And so that doesn't affect their like just overall morale.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's they they are working around the clock, and there's just simply when you're working at a certain capacity in some places where it's difficult to see all of the things that are interconnected. I know what my role is. I know I can, if I'm left alone, I can do this by the end of next week.
Hmm.
Are
Yeah.
you going to be left alone? No. So what do we do? Let's bring back the financial conversation, right?
Yeah.
Personal finance. I know how much I spend in a month, right? I've been paying attention to this. I know that, and I know that I'm going to spend X amount of dollars in a month. And then somebody says, "Okay, is it going to go exactly like that?" Well, no. My kid's going to end up in the emergency room at some point. I'm going to have to replace the tires on the truck at some point. Are we planning for that? No, because we don't know when that's going to happen. But when it
Hmm.
happens, it happens, and we got to accommodate that. So there are two ways of doing that. You take an average of when that actually happens, and you take that dollar amount and you spread it across all of them. So I know I'm going to spend X, and I know what my extra things are that come along, and so I'm going to do X plus 20%. That's going to cover the ER visits and all the extra stuff. Um, from a business perspective, everybody's mechanism on that is different, and they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They don't know if they're going to have an escalated order come in. If I'm left alone, I can do this by next week. Sure, but nobody's going to leave you alone,
Hmm.
right? Things are going to happen on the shop floor that are going to take priority, and then instead of the normally this one thing takes me an hour, is now
Hmm.
we've got it took me four, and the space that I had planned to do that in between this big meeting and that big meeting is now gone. And
Hmm.
so instead of adding 3 hours, because
Hmm.
we thought we had it, to our overall delay, I can't get to that to the next week because that's when my window comes up again. And now it took me an extra week because that one thing came up, right?
Absolutely.
And this is fine if you know that it's going to happen. And if you do it at scale, somebody's got a plan for that. And if we're not planning it at the individual level, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't plan for it at the management
Mhm.
level and at the executive level, right? So we should be thinking about these things so that we can accommodate them.
Mhm.
Somebody has to.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I think that is where core change management is confused. One, because the example that you gave, they identified what was best for their organization, not somebody else's, not, their moms or their neighbors or their
Mhm.
competitor, but what makes sense for them and their processes, right?
Mhm.
And then they tested it, right? They were able to be able to showcase results based on that. And
Yeah.
then last but certainly not least, change is no longer in a modern enterprise a destination, right? Like it's the same thing that we're not seeing with a lot of like bigger monolithic enterprise level implementations anymore, because the work stream is so specialized, the business is so specialized,
Yeah.
that we need to be able to have a different approach. And I think that's where agile specifically gets so misunderstood, is because there's a difference between being agile, right? Being flexible in the definition of the world, and an agile methodology, or
Hmm.
an IT team, or a product development mechanism, all of those different pieces.
Right. Well, I think that let's use another more fun example.
We're fun.
NASA's going to put a permanent base on the moon. That's cool, right? That's a destination. That is a milestone, right? We have people permanently residing on another solar body. That's cool, right? Okay, so what are they do? They're going to put this equipment on the moon and they're going to send some people there. Yeah? Are we done? No. We got to figure out a lot of different stuff once we get there. How are we going to get water? How are we going to get food? How are we going to take a small team of people living on the moon and turn it into a population living on the moon? Because let's make no mistake about it. That's what's next, right? At some point, possibly in our lifetime, people will be vacationing on the moon. This is a step in that direction, yeah? So, how do we do that? Okay. The executive strategy in this scenario is designed around what? Putting a permanent settlement on the moon. What does execution on that look like? Well, we know the word's permanent, right? We're going to send stuff up that is not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Permanent means a sustainable population of people, right? I mean, I guess if you decided that permanent on the moon meant that we just were going to have stuff up there, that's already done. We did that a long, long time ago, from a perspective of, um, I mean, the moon lander is still up there, right? Like that stuff's still there. There's still a flag on the moon. That's not a permanent settlement. It involves people, right? So let's bring our people along. And as we're thinking about this in a perspective of the plan now, it's the word permanent becomes a part of our execution and our strategy. So everybody at NASA is aligned around this thought process of permanent. So they're talking about where. They've chosen the south pole of the moon because they believe that is where it is most likely that there is water. Frozen water on the moon. Awesome. We got water on the moon. Okay. What happens when we use up all of it? Are we bringing that? What happens that water turns to waste, right? Are we
Mm-hmm.
bringing it home? No, they're going to turn it back into water at some point, right? So that's a part of the conversation. Permanent settlement, food. How are we going to get people back from the moon? How are we going to get people just the same way from the space station? We send people to the space station and we bring them back,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the part of it that's key on this. And I think that another piece of I'm all military today for some reason, I guess. Um, Top Gun,
Oh God.
Top Gun Maverick, right? We're 45 minutes in, so this is it's time.
It's where it
The
get weird. It's where you
listen,
get weird. Mhm.
the executive decision is made to have this target, and For a little while, the strategy was not getting people home. It was executing a mission. And the strategy became, and it changed everything, how do we strike the target and come home? Right? That's the whole premise of the mission. How do we do this impossible thing and survive? And that's your business should be set up the same way. How do we make this impossible change and survive? Right? And grow. Yeah? That's the whole idea. You do these things as a business for those types of things. So anyway.
I mean, I think that's always important to be able to understand like the why behind that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest piece in kind of like closing out this conversation is, what do you suggest when we have, bigger executive strategies and they're having trouble translating? What are a couple things people can do that you can really help with? And let's do Ryan's question before that one. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll end on that one, and then if you have any other questions, either
Yeah.
or comments on that, definitely pop them in these last couple minutes. How often do you run into executive strategies that are intermediary objectives because the bigger strategy can't be shared or not verified?
It's usually because it can't be shared, right? This is an executive conversation, right? Some of these discussions are, um, they're secret conversations, right? This maybe secret's the wrong word, but it's not, right? The executives have a strategy that is something that is not shared more broadly. Let's say, for example, let's say a publicly traded organization was positioning to acquire another publicly traded organization, and that is a big part of our strategy, and so we are going to do these things in order to prepare for that. You can't tell the market those things unless you're Elon Musk and do whatever you want, because he's his way of thinking is like, well, if what I have to say means it costs me a bunch of money, whatever, I've got a bunch of money. But if we're thinking about it from a perspective of executive strategies that are often not seen because they're not shared, that's a piece of it. But it's that executive's job then to convey these intermediary objectives in alignment with a larger strategy and earn the trust of the organization to execute on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you build through that, you have intermediary objectives that are set up to support the larger strategy so that you can end up in a spot that you wanted to end up in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty common. So when we think about that type of thing, and to connect that to your question on what does it actually look like
Mm-hmm.
when we get into these things, what do you focus on? The focus is on the keeping things nice and tight and keeping things really well aligned towards an actual purpose. You would be shocked at how useful an agenda and a purpose is
Absolutely.
for a
Yeah.
meeting. You will also be shocked at how much more you can accomplish in 30 minutes than an hour. It sounds backwards, right? But
No.
let's get down to this. Um, in a half an hour conversation, I know I've got an agenda. I've got three things to accomplish in 30 minutes. And I'm gonna go bang, bang, bang. Because I gotta knock this out. I don't have time for chit chat. I'm gonna knock it out. And in 30 minutes, towards the last 5 minutes of it, because I've been cranking along at a good pace, the last 5 minutes are all right, we set out to get these three things. What are they? Or do we need more time? And then, well, we got those three things. So here they are, one, two, three. In an hour-long conversation, how much time do you spend when somebody sees an hour-long conversation on their calendar? They're more likely to show up 5 to 10 minutes late.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really more like a 50-minute conversation, and then you spend the first 5 minutes chit-chatting while we wait for them, because it's not well, these aren't one-on-one discussions. You chit-chat, and that chit-chat turns into when so and so shows up, all right, let's start the discussion. But we've already started a pace of chit-chat, and so and so shows up, hey, we were talking about, it's Friday morning, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, and now all of a sudden that person showed up 5 minutes late. Now we've taken up our 10 minutes, and then we're in a slow start. and that slow start carries the rest of the conversation into a way where we're not switched on, and we're not in a space where we're paying attention to what's happening. So at the end of it, we've accepted this slow pace to the meeting, which means that we've accepted the slow pace to the purpose. And so we asked in the last 10 minutes, what did we need to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And we get back into the wishy-washy conversation because we've allowed it to become that. And now we've ended with none of our three things, and certainly needing another meeting because we just wasted an entire hour getting most of the way there when we could have just gotten the whole way there in a half an hour because we were focused, right?
Yeah.
That's that. There's a facilitation involved in that, and it does take a skill set to do that in
Mm-hmm.
order to focus on this. And this is something that we're teaching our a number of our clients right now. How do you do that? How do you focus on that? Well, you start with an agenda and you get focused on it. You can have other conversations and other discussions that are meant to be softer, but right now we're not in those soft conversations. We got a job to do. We got to get done. We got to get this information. We got to move on. Otherwise, that hour-long meeting that it took us a week to schedule is now pushed off for another week, and it took
Yeah.
us 2 weeks to do something that we
Yeah.
could have found a half an hour time slot for tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's funny you should bring that. We are on our TikTok lives, which if you don't join, definitely invite you to join those on Tuesdays and Thursdays that we do on my TikTok channel. We were talking about like the best traits of a project manager, and those 30-minute meetings were like key to that, to being able to, because a lot of people have questions of, how do you really close the gap between being able to garner those technical requirements from the business, right? To being able to support them, but effectively remind them of what you're capable of. And so that's a big piece of understanding the nuances of project management, and how you effectively have these types of execution based conversations, right? We could talk strategy all day long, but if we don't know how to execute that, then it becomes really just a waste of everyone's time, right? So
Right.
yeah. Well,
Well,
good.
there's a
No,
bit of that turns just as much into the how many of you guys have seen somebody who's a great individual contributor turned into a bad manager?
exactly. Yeah.
The skill set's different.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Just as a reminder, we are live every Friday here on LinkedIn and YouTube. We do lives on Instagram Wednesdays, TikTok Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you can pretty much catch us every single day on all of our channels except for Mondays. Mondays, we got our 30-minute meetings that we got to fit in for sure. So, but if you have any questions, a lot of these, again, can be incredibly nuanced, even if you're watching this after the live. Definitely hit us up in the DMs, and then we can talk about like what that actually looks like for your organization.
Yeah.
And we definitely invite you to reach out to our website or anything else like that if you're curious about what we do. But definitely appreciate everyone being here. Thank you, Adam. Thank you to all of our great questions. These are super important to have the conversation, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.